In this video, we're going to talk about Chapter 7, Input Validation. There's the chapter topics. You can read them when you read the chapter. Garbage in, garbage out. If a program reads bad data as input, it's going to produce bad data as output. You make sure that when you write a program, you only accept good data. Input validation, all input should be inspected before processing. If it's invalid, it should be rejected and the user should be prompted to enter the correct data. For example, first name, you don't know all the valid first names, but you can make the user enter in a first name. You compare it to blanks. If it's blanks, it's an error. Same with last name. Middle name, you really can't compare it to blanks because not everybody has a middle name. Same with phone numbers. Not everybody has a phone number. So that's the type of questions you have to ask when you're trying to figure out what to do error checking on. Let's go over this program right here. What this is going to do is going to declare real hours, pay rate, and gross pay in line 3, and it's going to get the number of hours worked in line 6 and 7, the hourly pay rate in line 10 and 11. They're calculating gross pay in line 14, and they're displayed in line 17. Notice the currency format. That function will put dollar signs and commas and decimal positions in your output. You can't use that in Flogorithm, but most languages has a function similar to that. Figure 7.1 shows you the validation loop to do error checking. Notice it's done in a loop instead of an if statement. A lot of people want to do it in ifs. The problem with doing it in an if, it can make them enter it in again, but if they enter it in incorrectly, it's just going to go on through the program and not stop them again. You get input, and then they check to see if it's invalid. If it's invalid, they display an error message, get the input again, goes back up and checks to see if it's invalid again. Once it's valid, it goes down to no and then processes the rest of the program. A priming read. You have to have a priming read to get the first input from the user. Notice how in this pseudocode how that works. You're doing the display for them to enter a test score, and then you're getting the score. Then inside your loop, you're checking that first score that they entered up in the priming read. If it's less than 0 or if it's greater than 100, then they're going to display an error and then get the input score again. Go back up to the while loop. Check it again. If it's still invalid, they'll stay in that loop until they enter in 0 through 100. Any number from that, and it will be correct. Writing validation functions. For complex validation, it is recommended to write a function. This process can make the code look cleaner. Plus, another example is I can write a function and my coworkers can just use my function. Validating string input. Some strings must be validated, such as those programs that ask for a specific string input like yes in all lowercase, or programs that specify a string to be specific length like password validation. Remember that a lowercase yes is different than an uppercase yes. When you're writing this in code, you would want to either use the upper or lower function to no matter what the user entered in, you would check. Like if you used the upper function, you would test against all caps yes. If you used the lower function, you would test it against all lowercase yes. Input validation is defensive programming. That means you want to anticipate both obvious and unobvious errors that can happen. A lot of the errors that the user is going to enter is just typos, or they don't know what you're expecting. So, for instance, if you're expecting the pay rate to be between $10 and $20 an hour, then you need to tell them that when they're inputting the pay rate. Type of errors to consider: empty input, where the user accidentally hits the enter key before entering, or they enter the wrong type of data. Common errors. State abbreviation should be 2-character strings. Zip code should be the proper format of 5 or 9. The hourly wages and salary amount should be numeric values and within ranges. Date should be checked. Time measurements should be checked. And check for reasonable numbers. If you have an hourly rate, somebody puts in 10,000, that's not even reasonable. Now let's look at the lab sheet. It says, imagine a program that calls for the user to enter a password of at least 8 alphanumeric characters. Identify at least 2 potential input errors. So you just think about what you could do wrong if you was entering in a password that has this criteria. Well, I could make it less than 8, right? Or I could make it only numeric characters, or I could make it only alphabetic characters. That's how you do that. That's what you think about when you're answering these. And then on step 3, it says open your Chapter 5 Lab 1 file and review Lab 1.2. This program allows the user to enter in 7 days worth of bottle returns and then calculate the average. Examine the program and identify at least 2 potential input errors. And then you just follow on down when you get to Lab 1.2. You read over this, then do step 2. Do step 3, and you just fill in the blanks here. Now, read this one carefully. All you're doing on this example is you're filling in the validation code. What would you do to make sure that they put the correct information in there? And you say, well, what is the correct information? Look up here and it tells you. Rewrite the module with an input validation loop inside the existing while loop that will verify the entry into today's biology is greater than 0. If they enter a 0 or a negative value, display an error message. So that's what you put in here. All right. Then just fill that out. May not take all these lines, but it may do. It may or may not take all these lines to complete it. All right, let's look at the programming challenge. Design a payroll program that prompts the user to enter an employee's hourly pay rate and the number of hours worked. Validate the user's input so that only pay rates in the range of $7.50 through $18.25 and hours in the range of 0 to 40 are accepted. The program should display the employee's gross pay. So it tells you the input, it tells you the output, and it tells you the validation that you need to do. You say, well, how do I get gross pay? You know how you get gross pay. You take your hours times your rate. Make sure you do the validation. I have some students do this program and they don't put the validation in there. That's the main part of the program. And as you know from previous chapters, if your program only has one error, but it's the main error or the main concept in this program, I give you a 0 and give you an opportunity to fix it and turn it back in for a grade update. I don't want to just count off 25 points and give you a 75. I want you to know how to do it and understand it. So again, contact me if you have any contact me if you have any questions, and we'll. If you have any questions, contact me. I hope this video helps.